What's up, listeners? It's Andrea. Today, we love salt and pepper men. Shereese explains the science of reading body language, and we ask the question, why are we still traumatized by Encounter at Farpoint? Come nerd out with us.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the #1 place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Today we're breaking down Season 7, Episode 3, Interface. This episode was written by Joe Manoski and directed by Robert Weimer. LaForge uses a virtual reality probe to explore a wrecked ship inside a gas giant. Already, it's such a cool concept. Like,
Yeah.
VR and you're wrecked in the atmosphere of a gas giant. That's so cool. But he's preoccupied with the disappearance of his mother's ship. Geordi defies Picard's commands and risks his life in what appears to be a futile attempt to rescue his mom. Oh.
Yeah, which is really sad and sweet.
Really sad and sweet. And also it's like, wouldn't you do the same? Like,
yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Orders, schmorders. Like,
yeah,
I think
my mom is dying and needs my help. Like, court-martial me later. Like, I gotta go.
Right, exactly. That, like, if she's cool, if she's fine in the end, court-martial me all day long, right?
All day long, doesn't matter.
And I think that's why, just one of the many reasons why I don't belong in the military.
Yes.
One of the many. One to add to a very long list of reasons why that is not my career of choice. That would not keep anyone in this country safe. So let's all be thankful for that. So my initial thoughts about this episode was, oh man, is this the one about Geordi's mom? It was just like, oh, here we go. Because this is one of the episodes I often skip because I remember not liking it. And so my only other initial thought was, well, at least we get it out of the way early in the season. It's only the 3rd episode, and the 1st episode doesn't even count because it was a continuation of last season's storyline.
Yeah.
It's really like the 2nd episode. So that was my initial thoughts. I had no recollection of anything about this other than something was on fire. That's it. I didn't remember this cool probe thing. I didn't remember that at all. What about you? What were your initial thoughts going into this episode?
It was kind of the same as yours. It was like, this is the one where Geordi's mom goes missing, but it's like not really her, and Geordi's acting all crazy, and I don't want to watch this one. That was kind of my initial sort of take on it. Now that you say it, though, it is only the 3rd episode in season 7, and like really, it's only the 2nd because Descent Part 2 was a wrap up of season 6. But thinking back, like all of the early season, like all of the early episodes of the new seasons, like always kind of struggled. Even
what? I actually don't think that's true. I think
really?
No, I don't think that's always true. Now we did have family after like the Locutus Borg, and that was trash. But we also had I think Ship in a Bottle or not Ship in a Bottle, Elementary Dear Data was like our second episode.
2nd or 3rd episode of season 2. Yeah.
I think it was like, and then we had The Child, I think, which I actually like that episode, even though it's got some problems. But it's like a compelling story. I don't think they've always struggled. I think they've maybe half the time struggled and half the time actually been good or decent. So to me, I guess I'm reason with this.
I guess I'm just really burned by Encounter at Farpoint, which is the pilot episode. However, I will say this.
You're still burned by that, girl? We're on season 7.
I know, but it's a really fucking bad episode. However, I will say this. I was reading, I think I was on Reddit, where someone was talking about they had grown up watching TOS and they were just now getting to TNG, and they were like, I'm gonna watch every single episode from the beginning to the end. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And they were like, you know what? Compared to the original series, Encounter at Farpoint is vastly stronger than almost any TOS episode.
Do you believe that, though? Now, you've seen some TOS.
I've seen some TOS, but not all.
But would you agree with that statement?
You know what? I will say, I think it's hilarious that season 7, we're talking about the pilot episode again, but the pilot episode has a lot of work to do in any show. It has to introduce
of course, the
characters, the mission, a new ship, a new everything, right? And I think to that effect, it was a 2-parter, so it's 2 hours instead of 1, but it did a pretty good job. The storyline itself, like, I think what made it kind of stupid was the moon jelly. So it's like you take away that dumb special effect and you take away Troy being so thirsty and useless and bimbo-y. And then like you actually have like an okay episode. Like the writing was a little clunky.
You know what? You're right. Now that you've said that, I'm like, the thought of Q putting humanity on trial is interesting. The thought of a being that can hold you in a space net, that's freaking cool. Even the idea of Troy being, recognizing sentient life form a life form on the planet that can like materialize anything your heart desires is really cool. I think it's just the string together, or I don't know what, knocked it off kilter for me and made it unenjoyable. But you're right. There's a lot of really, really interesting ideas going on in that episode.
Yes, a ton. And I would even go so far as to say, if we took the pilot episode and reworked it and shot it in like season 5 or 6 or 7, it would be a really dope episode. It would.
If we didn't have to introduce every single character and all the backstories.
You had to learn like 50 new faces and a new ship and a new aesthetic and a new mission, and also the B plot with the humanity being on trial. Like, maybe if you take that part away and then just go to a planet who's got this kind of like suspicious type of outpost that like, a sentient being is like held against its will and being worked as a slave. It's like, yeah, that would totally work as like a season 7 episode and wouldn't have so many kinks. But anyway, yeah, girl, we're over here talking about this.
Yeah, I don't know what we were talking about originally, but in any case, welcome to season 7.
Yeah,
and so your initial thoughts were similar to mine.
Yeah, it was just like, I don't want to watch. I remember not loving this episode. I remember not liking it at all, and so I've always skipped it. So I was really dragging my feet watching this one, like to get to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, here we go. The episode kicks off right in the middle of some kind of emergency. Geordi is climbing a ladder into like what looks like a Jeffries tube. And I'm like, whoa, first of all, he's not wearing a visor.
His eyes look normal, he doesn't have really cool contacts. So you're like, what is going on? Is this a dream?
he's got like normal eyes, like,
which looks like, bizarre to me. Looks totally bizarre. And LeVar Burton is a gorgeous human being.
He is.
But seeing him in this role, in this uniform, in a freaking Jeffries tube with normal people eyes was bizarre.
I thought the same thing. I had a hard time wrapping my head around it. And I also was like, seeing him without the visor blocking his eyes, I was like, damn, he is so smoking hot. But like with the visor, like they say the eyes are the window to the soul. I'm like, it misses that for me, right? So seeing him without the visor and having like LeVar Burton's actual eyes, I was like, damn, LeVar, you were a stone cold fox. And guess what? He still is.
He still has, even more so, because now he's got a little salt and pepper thing going on. It's very James Bond.
Like a fine wine. LeVar Burton is an absolute silver fox. And I am here for that. Like thirst posts and all that. I was like, oh my God, this man is so freaking gorgeous. But yeah, no, the salt and pepper. I'm just gonna kind of blanket speak here for women. Men who are listening and like grieve the loss of your youth and you're getting salt and peppery. We love that shit. We cannot get enough of that. It is so sexy. Like women in general, I've noticed, like really love that. So, maybe lean into it if you're feeling a little like, oh, I've like lost my youth and all that. Like, okay, yeah, we all sort of have, but if you got the salt and pepper, rock it.
Well, anywho, Geordi's climbing through this Jeffries tube. And I'm kind of like, why are his eyes normal? And we just don't have an answer to that, because
we have no answer.
Now there's like smoke in the Jeffries tube and you're like, oh, and something's on fire?
Yeah. And you hear Riker on the comm being like, Geordi, have you been able to isolate it and shut it down? And you're like, what the okay, my first thought was some kind of training simulation in the holodeck. But even still, like, Geordi doesn't ever feel like his blindness is an actual handicap for him. Right. He's like, no, I have even better vision than others who can see. So even in the holodeck, even as like Watson, he still kept the visor on. So I was like, what's up with this visor? Okay.
Yeah, my first thought was dream sequence. But when the comms start kicking in, you're like, huh? Like, why would they be speaking to him and giving him directions on the comms in his dream? Dreams are usually more ephemeral and odd. This seems very much like a day in the life. So lots of question marks here. And then he says, yeah, something's hot. It's over 2,000 degrees. And I was like, 2,000 degrees?
Yeah, stop right there. Yep. Something is up. What? I wrote in my notes, what is happening, with like a lot of A's. I was like, what the heck is happening? We very quickly get an answer. Cut to Beverly and Data's lab. Geordi is wearing one of the coolest and more easily replicable outfits. It's like an all black onesie, which I guess if you were to cosplay it, it'd be like yoga pants and just a fitted black, like long sleeve shirt. And he's wearing it's covered in like black and red and yellow and blue and green wiring running all over. And I was like, oh, he's
It's-
in like a VR setup.
It's very cool. It looks like a motion capture suit. So it's very much like a
Yes.
mocap suit, but not green or
Yes.
not with any, I don't even think it had any green. But it looked so cool. And this is long before those suits were a thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Like
That was
long before. I mean, I didn't look up the dates, but I'm pretty sure it was a hot minute. But he's not wearing those
Yeah.
for motion capture. He's wearing them to have more sensory experiences in
Yes.
this VR reality. So then you're like, wait, so is it real or is it not real? Because why does he need
Yes.
to feel it? And why what's hot and
Yes.
what's going on again?
So it turns out that it's called the interface for the most part over the episode. And they're like, oh, this interface is a probe that is testing out some stuff. And the interface probe connects straight into Geordi's visor. So he can see, hear, feel, smell everything as though he were really there.
Yeah, it connects into the same spots that his visor connects into. So
Yeah.
it goes like straight to his brain.
Yeah, but it actually looks like he's got sort of like a quasi visor on, but instead of going from one temple to the other in front of his face, it goes from
Yeah.
one temple to the other behind his face,
Right,
which I was
'cause
like,
it's
that's
still connecting to
cool.
to those little points, which is kind
Yeah.
of like, ugh, I don't know. It's very cool, and it's also like I don't want anything that you can connect to my brain so easily with. Like I want it
Yeah.
to be a little more effort, but they're basically just taking advantage of the fact that he already has this technology built into his body. He is
Yes.
specifically suited for this role. Now, anyone could do this. Anyone could have this whole interface reworked for them. They wouldn't need to have
Mhm.
anything inserted in their bodies, but because
Mhm.
of his unique situation, he's best suited for it on the whole ship because he knows how to interface with something without seeing it very easily, where everybody
Yeah.
else might be a little bit harder. And it is so cool. So it's a probe, but he can use the parts of the probe like it's his fingers
I
and toes
know.
and stuff.
It's like, it reminds me a lot of those like deep sea submersibles where they have like the claw arm that can like pick stuff up and
Mhm.
stuff, where it's very much like that. So it has like a glitch or two in it, but otherwise it's like nearly perfect. One moment I love is when Geordi goes into main engineering, like in this interface, and he looks into the panel and sees his reflection, but instead of seeing Geordi, you just see a probe in the
Mhm.
reflection. And I was like, wow, that's such a fun little like
That was a
trippy,
nice touch.
trippy little touch, and I loved it. So here's kind of what's actually happening. This science vessel, the Raman, is trapped in the atmosphere of a gas giant. It was supposed to descend to the surface, but maybe shields failed or something, but it is trapped in the upper atmosphere. And Geordi says the turbulence from the atmosphere is blocking our sensors. And I was like, well, imagine that. Like, imagine the
You know-
sensors.
You know what I wrote in my notes in all capitals was, where has this probe been during all of their dangerous AF missions?
Yes.
Like, and where does it go? Because just like all the other technology, including those amazing heat shields that we forgot where they came from 2 episodes later, we never hear about this thing again. This probe, you can't even have this probe in any other episodes because it
Yeah.
solves all the problems, especially this whole EM radiation, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
all that
It
crap.
solves all of this. You just send this probe to
Yes.
the planet. You send it to random space stations that have gone dark. You send it into ships that are no longer responding. Like,
Police
this solves
police
all the
have
problems.
police have things like this when they have like the bomb detonation robots that
Yeah.
they send in. It's like, this is what you need. Exactly. Where the heck has this thing been? Where has this been?
and where does it go?
I
When can
know.
get
Where does
one?
it go after this? I know. I'm still trying to figure out getting an exocomp for like a projector. I mean, I'll get to that in a minute. Now, it turns out there's 7 people who are on board that ship, and they're like, we don't know if they're alive or dead. There's a lot of interference. We can't get a read. So they're making plans to rescue the 7 people on the Raman. And Starfleet Command calls Picard. So he takes in the ready room. And this admiral comes on, and they're kind of shooting the breeze for a minute. And they're like, oh, when's the last time I saw you? Oh, at the company softball game, whatever. And this admiral was like, 9 days ago, the Hera left on a routine courier mission. It's gone dark. We can't find it. We've retraced their steps. They've been missing for over 72 hours. And Picard says, really? Okay, I'll inform Commander LaForge. And I was like, uh-oh. Like, we got no answers, though, during that conversation.
So this ship has been missing. And he says 4 days ago, the ship went missing. We've been searching for it for 3 days. So like
That's
one
right.
day into the missing, they
Mhm.
started looking for it. It's already been 3 days. And he said, and we're going to continue searching for another 3 days, which I think is like 3 days more than most missing people probably get. So he's like, we're doing another 3 days, but that's just like doing our due diligence. We don't actually expect to find anything in the next 3 days. So so basically now it's the countdown. It's the last 3 days that we're going to be searching, and then we're just going to call it off. And you're like, wow, this is horrible. And then when Picard's like,
Yeah.
I'll go and inform Lieutenant LaForge, you're like, uh-oh, wait a minute. This is actually really, really, really bad.
Yeah, yeah. And so Picard does come to the lab to speak to Geordi, and it turns out that Geordi's mom is the captain of the Hera. So poor Geordi. It cuts to commercial, and when we come back from commercial, I think it's very sweet and very, very healthy. Geordi goes to his quarters and comforts himself by watching an old video message from his mom. And I think it's really cute. Like, she was trying to set him up with this new engineer who is very much like Geordi aboard the Hera, and she keeps like tweaking the engines and doing all these modifications, and it's kind of right up Geordi's alley. And she's like, well, we're going to be nearby you in like a couple of weeks. Like, I should introduce you to. It's really adorable. It's really, really sweet. And Riker comes in to see Geordi.
And I'm like, man, where has your mom been all this time? Because you could have used her help.
I know. Seriously.
She seems like she has a good head on her shoulders and knows somebody who would be good for you, because you need some additional support in this area, because the girls you pick are just not available. They're just not.
Yeah, and you're not doing a super swell job with them, but okay. Riker comes to see Geordi, and he offers to give Geordi a few days off to process this news, and Riker is like, I'll run the interface, even if it's not a perfect fit, it can still work, so you can have some personal leave time, and we can still search for these potential survivors on the Raman. And Geordi, I don't expect anything less from Geordi. He's an engineer, he's a doer and a fixer. So when he's in grief, he's like, no, I'm the only person for this job. Let's go right now.
Well, I mean, he also says to Riker, which I think is fair, he said, as far as I'm concerned, her ship is just missing. Like, no one has declared her dead. She's just missing. So as far as I know, she went on some, this part's a little bit delusional, but she's like, she took them on some kind of trip or whatever. Like, that probably didn't happen. But his point is
a wild hope.
But his point is that, she's, as far as I know, she's only missing at this point, and there's nothing more devastating than that, which I think is fair, because how many times have crew members or ships or the whole Enterprise gone missing for a couple days because they got into some stuff with the Ferengi, or they got kidnapped by some alien species or whatever.
Who knows? Yeah.
So I thought that was actually fair for him to be like, I'm just thinking that she's missing, and missing is not the level of grief where I need to like stop working, because she could be found any moment. Now, of course, he probably doesn't know that in 3 days they're going to stop looking, which is a whole different situation. But at this moment, I think it is best for him to keep working under the circumstances. If they had known that she was gone and then he's still working, then I'd be like, no, homie, you just need to go see Troy. But right now, I see that he needs to do something to stay busy, and there is no guarantee that his mom is anything more than missing.
And the Enterprise has had their own fair share of misadventures, so like it could just be something like that. Surely the Enterprise isn't the only ship in the entire fleet that's had like crazy adventures, right? So he plugs in with the interface, and he goes aboard the Raman in the probe, and the Raman is a mess. There must be a hull breach somewhere. He heads toward the bridge. He's found someone who's trapped under some rubble, and he doesn't have enough power to lift the beam off of the person who's laying in the hallway. And so he's like, ramp up the like interface to like 80% or 90%, because they're like, we don't want to go too high because you can go into neural shock because it's directly connected to your brain. So this is the first time that I've ever seen, and that I can recall, a sci-fi that writes about the dangers of interfaces like this, where like, there's lots of stories where like, if you die in the program, you die in real life, like in the Matrix or like Ready Player 2 and stuff like that. But this was like way in like 93 or 94. So I'm like, dang, this is very early on. Like, if the probe is destroyed, but like if we juice it up too much and connect it too strongly to you to give you more and more sensation and strength and all this other crap, like you can die. You can go into neural shock and die. And I was like, ooh.
Yeah, this technology is like the coolest thing ever. He goes to hold the beam, and he can't hold it because he's not strong enough. And he says, Data, boost the confinement beam on the tractor beam. So they increase the strength of the tractor beam, which the tractor beam is his hands. So we see them as his hands, but in reality, it's really the probe shooting out tractor beams, picking up things. That to me was such a really cool, just little touch to be like, hey, don't forget, this isn't Geordi. This is actually a probe. But the probe just happens to look exactly like Geordi. But dropping in those little things makes us go like, oh, that's why he can lift a super heavy beam. Oh, that's why he can open a door like that. And then later on, he actually shoots like a laser beam out of his hand. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
I know.
Like
I know. It's the coolest.
I love this blend of technology and humanity.
Mhm.
And you're right. They do talk about the dangers in a very reasonable way if you're using any kind of new technology. Like, be careful, it could be dangerous.
Yes.
And that comes into play later. So they're not just saying it to say it, like that's part of the storyline, which is it's very slick. I have to say this week's episode, even though it's not my favorite episode in the history of episodes, is so much better than last week's because there is one story. There's exactly one
it's
story.
Just one story. Yeah.
We all know what's going on. And even little details like if you boost the gain too much, it could hurt your brain, is vital to the rest of the story. It's not just a thing. It's not just eating a plate of dessert because it's fun.
It's the opposite of a MacGuffin. It's Chekhov's gun. It's like they're introducing you this idea so that now it's vital to the rest of the story because we know if we increase that confinement too high or whatever, the Trek term for it is, it's like Geordi's brain is going to get zapped and he's going to die, right?
Right.
Now, it doesn't totally connect with me in certain respects where I'm like, why can't we just boost the tractor beam on the probe without like boosting Geordi's interface?
It was two things. One thing was boosting the tractor beam so he could lift the thing, but the second thing was boosting the interface for his sensation. When he first got on the ship, like everything was gray and black.
Gray and fuzzy. It was black and white and fuzzy.
So they had to improve it so he could see more clearly, and then everything had color. They have to improve it so he can feel with his hands and everything else. But there's the EM interference or the ionic interference or whatever they call it in this episode. And that's like cutting the signal between him and the probe. So that's why they have to keep boosting it so he doesn't lose his signal. So when the ship moves deeper into the planet's atmosphere later on in the episode, they have to boost it even higher because he's losing his connection.
Yeah,
his Wi-Fi signal's low.
That makes more sense. So yeah, it's super cool to see Geordi have a like go-go gadget phaser hand.
So cool.
So one of my favorite shots ever. He blasts the door open to this like little area where survivors most likely would have gone if there was a hull breach, and they're all dead, and it's awful. And a fire starts behind Geordi, and he turns around and starts screaming, and Beverly has Data immediately disconnect the interface suit, and Geordi's hands are really badly burned. And we're like, oh no. See, this is sort of introducing that like too much of
what happens in the Matrix stays in the real world too.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, if you die in the Matrix, you die in the real world. So in sickbay, Beverly explains that there must have been some sort of energy discharge in the suit. We need to run this again though to retrieve the ship and the bodies along with the information they were trying to collect.
Once again, do we need the information? Probably.
Do we? Can't we just like download it?
Hey, we've got this super nifty probe. How about we just like scoop up a little of the gas and take it on back to the Enterprise?
Yeah.
We didn't need to put that whole ship down there.
Problem solved, right?
But it would be nice to get the bodies. I think that would be like the most respectful thing to do for their families. But the Data, I just again was like, I'll really buy that.
Yeah. Do we need all that? Besides, at the rate of like technology in this day and age, things go fast enough as it is. Like my phone that was new 2 years ago is totally obsolete now, which I freaking hate because it's like such a scam to make you buy more. But in 23 something, that information is going to become public domain in like 36 hours. So we could just hold off and wait and not risk anybody else's lives. But in the meantime, Geordi's like, well, okay, I have some stuff I need to do. So you see him talking to his dad, who I thought was interesting, had a blue uniform on. Mom was a captain. She had a red uniform on. And Geordi's got the yellow of like ops and engineering. And I was like, wow, your family has like one of every color. Like you guys are all so deeply embedded in Starfleet. It's pretty cool. Dad wants to have a funeral, but Geordi's like, whoa, slow your roll. Like she's not dead. She's missing. And Dad's like, I think Mom is dead, especially since Starfleet has basically listed the Hera as like missing, presumed, lost.
Yeah.
And they've got like 2 days, maybe more of searching. And that's it, And Geordi, I totally get that. Like, I would absolutely feel the same. He's like, you think what you want. I'm not jumping to any conclusions yet. I gotta go,
This
and I was
such a tough situation, right? Because Dad's like, me and your sister are gonna have the funeral is gonna be on Vulcan because most of the people on the ship on the Hera were Vulcan, but we're gonna have therefore we're gonna have a separate service just for us, just to honor your mom's memory. And Geordi kind of flew off the handle, and I just wrote in my notes, so I'm guessing he won't be at the service, right? And what's going to happen is he's like, mom's fine, and he's not going to be at the service because he can't accept that she's dead. But then they're going to have a service. It's just going to be Dad and sister, and Geordi's not going to be there. And then later on, Geordi's going to be like, I wish I would have gone to that to be with you guys. It's just like a missed This is the really hard thing with stuff like with grief of loved ones, because everyone handles it differently. And it's a time where people can come together and comfort one another. And it's a time where people can split apart because they're feeling so many big emotions. They're so volatile that they just cannot be with others. And it's really sad because their family's already pretty small and just got smaller.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And that is really hard. There is a term that I've learned in recent years. It's called ambiguous grief. And it's usually if someone is either missing, presumed dead, or missing in action, or I had a loved one like sort of lose their mental facilities and sort of became a different person that we now cannot have the same relationship we used to have. And it's been a huge amount of grief because there's a part of it that feels like a death with something like this. And especially like with Jordy's mom, it's like, I don't want to give out hope because it feels almost like you're letting go of them too fast. It's almost like a test of your love. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not losing hope now. You know what I mean?
It's like you're abandoning them. You're doing something bad to them. It's like that. Yeah. It's like that movie Castaway, right? I don't remember how long Tom Hanks was on that island, but I know it was years. And how many years before you declare somebody as officially dead? Like probably not 7 or however many years he was gone. Yeah. So of course, when he comes back, spoiler, if you haven't seen this movie, maybe stop listening now.
It's been forever.
It's been like 37 years since that movie came out. But like when he comes back, like, of course, everyone he loves has moved on. And you have to, you can't hold on for 7 years and not know and not move your life forward and just keep waiting because you will drive yourself crazy with that. But this hasn't been 7 years. This has been like 3 days and he just found out about this morning. So
it's like he's not ready yet
he's not ready.
Like, well,
he's not ready.
Gone.
No.
Yeah.
And when is he going to be ready? Not today. Not right now. Not in the next 3 days.
No, not anytime soon. Yeah. That term ambiguous grief was really, really helpful for me in my own process. Cause it's like the person that you're grieving may still be alive,
right?
But they're gone to you. You know what I mean? And the chances that they ever come back is like almost zero. So it's like, okay, you have to. And so it becomes very, very difficult. Like
it's really tough.
Yeah. I almost think in certain respects, I almost think that an actual death is easier to process.
Right. Because there's proof.
Because it's clear. Yeah. It's clear. It's like, you're gone. There's absolutely no coming back, the end. Whereas missing is like, how long do you hold out that grief for? It's very, very tough.
And that actually happens later on in the episode. Riker has this same conversation with Geordi that we're having now. Yes, so maybe we can just like do that part now, is that he has that conversation where Riker's mom passed away when he was like 2. But somehow he remembers everything, or I don't know how. And he basically tells a story similarly where he was like, I couldn't let go of my mom either. My dad had to talk with my teacher and they both set me down to convince me that she was gone. And I had to admit that my mom had died. And like, he's trying to have a really sweet moment and be really empathetic. And I would have reacted exactly the way Geordi did. He was like, that was your mom. My mom's totally different. Like, your mom was dead.
My mom is missing.
Yeah, you had a body, you had a funeral. Like, the body was there. You knew everything that was going on. This is different. My mom is missing. No one knows where she is. And that is a totally different, like, you know, losing a loved one versus a loved one being missing is not the same. They're both horrible. And I would want neither. No. But I think you're right. Having someone who actually, like, there is a body gives you closure that you don't
you can have yes, it's we learn at a pretty early age like what death is and that it's irreversible, right? So learning to process the death, you know, I will say this, my dad died when I was a teenager, and he got sick and died very quickly, but it was easier for me to process that it's like he got sick, he died, and there's no coming back, and now you just have memories. But having this missing thing or this, you're not the person you used to be, and like you may never return to that. It's like, at what point do you stop hoping? And the answer is not clear. And there are days that I still hope. And there are days, most of the time now, I'm like, okay, it's just, you gotta,
and we know
have to say goodbye to that person. And you know,
Right. And in this case, it's been 72 hours. So it's like, what are the odds that he's going to let go? Slim to none. And do we blame him?
Slim to none. No. But he does go to see a friend, which I was like, maybe it wasn't the best choice of friend, but he goes to see Data.
But it's his best friend.
It's his best friend. Yeah.
Is he going to go see Worf? No.
No, hell no. He probably should go see Troy, but he's not going to do that.
But he's not going to do that. Exactly.
No.
He should,
he goes to see Data, who's being a little strange. Like, Data's got like a blank laptop screen and he's staring at himself. And I thought, oh, is this a callback to like trying to look at your reflection? Kind of like the VR thing.
Oh, okay.
But that's what I initially thought. But I was like, oh, Data's actually talking about poetry. And he's like, there is like a race of people who experience their life through like poetry. They share their experiences with poetry, but their poetry has this like built-in moments of quiet emptiness where you can fully experience the emptiness because that's part of sort of the human experience.
And that's part of the beauty of the poems.
Yeah, the beauty of the poem is the pauses. And in this particular alien species, I didn't catch their name, but like their pauses can go on for like 3 to 4 days.
And this particular poem is in a 47-minute pause of emptiness when Geordi walks in.
Yeah.
I could not, first of all, so many things about this poetry don't work for me. 47 minutes of emptiness, hard pass. I'm not going to be enjoying the poetry of this particular people group at all. But it's perfect for Data because this is more of his exploration of just senses and consciousness and mindfulness and all the things. So Geordi's
I like the pauses. Maybe not 47 minutes and definitely not 3 to 4 days.
I'll give you that. There's a power in the pause. In this particular case, I would pass on it, but that was the point Data was making. There is a power in that. So Geordi's like, oh, okay, cool. You know, and Data's like, do you need to talk about your mother and your mother's death? And he's like, no, of course I don't. Geordi's just kind of like, absolutely not. Why would you even think that? And Data's like, okay, cool. Back to what I was doing.
Well, Geordi was like, well, because you said you were just passing by, but your quarters are not anywhere near mine. And Geordi goes, sometimes just passing by means I'm just passing by. And I was like, oh, Geordi. Do you really believe that, honey?
And Data's like, cool, sounds good.
Yeah.
But
then he goes, you're welcome to stare at the empty screen with me for a minute.
And then Geordi does. Like, it's just very
4 seconds. Yeah.
This is just a really sweet moment. I love this. This is my favorite bromance. I absolutely love the friendship between Data and Geordi. And this is just one of those moments where I'm just like drinking it all in, right? Because he's like, okay, cool. I'll enjoy the emptiness with you. And I think that was just a perfect parallel to what he's feeling right now and what's going on with him with all this turmoil and chaos and emptiness. Like losing a loved one does leave a big empty spot. So I thought even their choice of poetry and how Data's experiencing it matches perfectly with what Geordi's going through. So I love that little piece. And anyways, Geordi finally kind of breaks down and says, hey, Data, I think you gave up too soon. And Data's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, remember when I said like 2 seconds ago that just passing by sometimes just means I was just passing by? Well, that's not what it meant. Yeah. So everything you just said that you guessed and surmised about me was actually correct. So you should probably push me a little harder. You just see Data kind of like looking puzzled throughout this whole interaction because he's like, I know I'm not saying the right thing, but I have no idea what the right thing is.
Yeah.
Which is what we all feel in times when we're trying to comfort a friend or loved one in grief. It's the same feeling. We just don't have the language or the body language to show like, I don't know what to say right now.
I don't know what to say. And I've also been Geordi in this situation too, when I've been in distress in some way and maybe don't have the right people to reach out to, but I just reach out to whoever I can because I need to reach out to somebody. It's better than nobody, right? So, okay, they do this. They talk about the Hera and, you know, Geordi kind of talks about how he really regrets like leaving his last message from his mom kind of on read and like didn't respond and stuff. But they don't get to it too much because then I believe they jump into the probe attempt to recover bodies. And now Geordi is back on the Ramon in the VR suit. And we know everybody's dead aboard the ship. And he's, you know, trying to reconfigure something. And then Geordi sees his mom standing on the bridge. And he's like, is it really you? What are you doing here? And this is already suspicious AF to me because we knew she was on the Hera, which is missing. Everybody on the Ramon is dead and she's not. And she's saying things like, it's me. Mom. And I'm like, nope. Something's super wrong here.
It's actually extremely creepy. And they did a great job.
Super creepy.
In not making it creepy because they could have lowered the lights. They could have added creepy music. Like it was already so unsettling that it would have just taken the littlest bit of effort to turn this episode into a horror. And they didn't do that.
Yes, they didn't.
They left it a mystery, which I appreciate because this would have been one of those ones that gives me nightmares, right? That your loved ones come back as ghosts on ship that haunt you and like, ugh. But that's not what happened. So she's just like, yeah, it's me. And it's very like the way she's talking is weird. And the people in the lab can only hear Geordi's side of things, but he's just like asking his mom all these questions. And the mom says, you have to go down to the surface. And he's like, oh, we have to go to the surface? What's going on? You're dying. Oh no. So Geordi reaches out to touch her because, you know, this is his mom who he thought was missing. And as soon as his skin, you know, or the probe contacts his mom's shoulder, there's a big zap and Geordi starts kind of seizing and then passes out. And you're like, oh my gosh. It was like, this is, I don't know, this is maybe our 15th electricity related sick day visits. And
maybe let's all just stay away. Maybe let's just all stay away from electricity going forward, because it doesn't really end well for the Enterprise most of the time. Yeah. And Mom is like, there's no time. We need to get down there. And I'm like, okay, no. And the whole time, you know, Geordi is speaking to his mom, but he's also speaking aloud the same words in the lab.
Right.
And so Beverly's like, LaForge, who are you talking to? Like, who? Because he's just in the lab going, it's you? You're here? How? What do you need? And they're like, okay, stop everything. Like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah. So Geordi's saying, report. What are you seeing? What's going on?
Mom is saying, we're dying. We need you. I need you. And that's when he goes to grab her arms and he gets zapped by her. And then boom, like, thank God we've jumped ahead like 15 minutes. No permanent damage to Geordi's brain. But like Beverly's like, I can't have him going through this again. Like that, he almost died. So Geordi, and I think this is sort of the perfect situation for him to come to this conclusion. He believes that the Hera is on the surface of the planet and is somehow communicating to Geordi through the Raman. And I was like, really, buddy? Really?
Because obviously she wasn't there. It was some kind of projection from her ship on the surface, obviously.
Yeah, and you're like,
really? How would she even know you were in the interface?
Right. Thank you. Yeah. And she's also like hundreds of light years away. Like suddenly she's on this ship where everybody else is dead. But it's okay. So at first, girl, can I just go on a rant for a minute? Because at first I was like, really, Geordi? This is the story you've constructed. But I know it's a lot of a desperation.
Right.
But then I remembered, we're talking to a man who served on a ship who has flown millions of light years by thinking it so. Okay. They had the traveler just think it so. They had its chief security officer killed by some sentient, embittered Metamucil. They've successfully stopped a Starfleet coup to some mind-controlling worms. Okay. They've fought space wizards. They're about to have its crew devolve into fucking proto-humans. They've rescued a dude trapped in the holding pattern of a transporter for 79 years. Shout out to Scotty on that one.
And a secondary Riker.
Thank you. They've gone back in time to battle some battle that wasn't even theirs, but then in the process ended up rewriting the history of the Metamucil murdered security chief. They've been blown up for 17 effing days on a repeated time loop. Talk about going missing. They've had an aged, decrepit Benjamin Button himself to death. Okay? They've been trapped in a 1920s/90s casino. They've been abducted and assimilated by half-cyborg species. Okay?
Is Geordi in that casino?
Yeah, I don't know, but I'm just thinking like the experience.
Yeah, everything they've had. Yeah.
They've been repeatedly fucked with by an omnipotent man-child. Yeah. They've been to the People's Court against a woman parading as the devil. Okay. They've battled twins of themselves. They've gone back in time to San Francisco to stop soul-sucking aliens from abducting ancient humans. Worst of all, when all else failed, Shereese, and certain death was upon them, a 15-year-old kid saved them like dozens of times.
Over and over again.
Skip is like hedonism. It's just the list. It's a free for all. So to be honest, this really isn't the craziest theory that I've ever heard of on Star Trek. That's all I'm saying.
We also had a giant space worm suckle the bridge, suckle the ship. I mean, we've had
silkworms in the transporters.
We have had that. We've had
transporter accidents where you turn into a 12-year-old.
A sentient holodeck character take over the entire ship. I mean, we've kind of had it all. So you're right. Saying that his mom is alive on a ship on the surface and projecting through his implants is actually one of the more reasonable things.
It totally is.
And he even has a theory for it. We find him in the observation lounge and he's like, check it out. Here's what happened. Okay. And he busts out all this stuff about, I don't even know what, wormholes and whatever the heck, but somehow the Hera that was 300,000 light years away snagged some rip in time that happens to empty out exactly on the surface of this planet that they happen to be on top of. And you're like, could happen.
Okay, so here's the deal. And I think that Geordi, I was like, again, after thinking about like all the nonsense that the Enterprise and its crew members have been through, the Hera passed by the same exact gas giant some number of days, like 10 days ago.
Yeah.
And might have picked up some sort of like trace resonance signature, something technology. And then when that trace resonance was like activated, it basically snapped the Hera back to where that trace signature had originated from, which was that gas giant. So it's like, you know what? Okay. It sounds ridiculous, but I could totally see the Enterprise experiencing something like that. I mean, they've
Yeah,
had
'cause, like-
electricity monsters take over their people. They've had, come on. I don't even
'Cause
get me started on the Antikins on the Sele, okay?
On a scale of 0 to pig people on a planet, this
Yeah.
one's like a solid 2. Like, this could happen.
Yeah, it could.
This could
It
happen.
could.
Did it,
But you
like,
know-
how likely is it? Not very likely. And I actually love
No.
this conversation that happens between, like, the bridge crew where
Yeah.
Picard's like, how likely is that, is that possible? And Data's like, yeah, it's possible. And then he goes, how possible? And he goes, it's almost impossible.
I know.
Love that Data comes to the rescue, though. He wasn't going to offer that it's almost impossible until you asked him for further clarification.
Yes. It was
going to stick with, it could happen.
He just wasn't volunteering that information. But yeah, for the most part, I think the team is just a really good friend and wants to hear him out. And I love Picard and Beverly for trying to keep it straight with him. They're like, look, I'm not saying that your mom was really communicating with you. I'm just giving you a reason to believe why you feel that way. Okay. And I was just like, oh, and Geordi's not hearing them. He's like, look, my mom is in danger. She needs me. She said she needs me. We've got to do something.
He's not listening to anyone. This is his full-on delusional grief mode.
Yes.
Not even willing to listen to any kind of logic. He's just he's just seen the mom he thought was missing. So of course he's just like, snap. That was his last straw.
You? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wouldn't even be talking right now. I'd be in that freaking like interface being like, all right, mom, how do we get you out? Like, I wouldn't even be doing all of this that he's doing to try to communicate with the others.
I wouldn't be like, stop, let me go and have a confab with the senior team. Yeah, I'd be like, I can wizard my way out of anything, except making a woman fall in love with me, but whatever. But like, Beverly was like, look, you almost died. Like, we're not putting you back into that thing. And Geordi is super pissed. But Picard tells Data.
He actually hits a chair on his way out.
I know, he's really? Like, damn it. Yeah.
I've never seen Geordi have a tantrum.
He's angsty. So. He's Starfleet angry. He's not angry enough to cause damage, but he is angry enough to like smack a chair on the way out, kind of harmlessly.
Yeah.
But Picard does tell Data, like, try to have a rescue plan in 2 hours because we are gonna listen to Geordi, right? Like, he's gotten us out of a whole bunch of pickles. So like, okay. But even for Geordi, he's like, 2 hours. Ugh. It's like, okay, Geordi, but like, how long do you think it takes to put together a rescue mission though? It's gonna be a minute. Picard does say, too, I really want you to talk to Counselor Troy. And of course, he's not into that either, but he does go and see Troy.
Oh, yeah. And Picard's like, that's an order.
Yeah.
Dismissed.
You're doing it. You're doing that.
Fine.
Yeah. So Geordi does go to Troy, and Troy is like, tell me about your mom. And I love this scene because Geordi goes, I'm on to you. You're not going to make me talk about my mom. Okay, so she sent me an email like 3 weeks ago. Like, he's immediately talked about her mom. So we do.
Did you notice how Geordi was on the literal opposite side of Troy's office? I didn't even know her office was that
angry
big.
Pacing.
He was just, he was angry pacing, but he was also, so there's so many interesting studies of body language that I am fascinated by because I feel like I'm Data and I'm always interested in how humans work. And if you look at people's feet, you can tell their intentions. Like if their feet are pointed away from you, they're not really into what you're saying. They kind of are looking for something better to do. If their feet are pointed towards you, they're like super into it.
Interesting.
If their bodies, are within a certain distance from you, they're like more engaged in what you're saying. If they're a different distance, then they're kind of like disconnecting. If their arms are crossed, then that is a defensive pose of like back off, or in my case, they're cold. But it could be,
you're like cold.
Right. But it could be like, back off, don't go there. Like if you broach an uncomfortable subject and somebody doesn't want to talk about, they'll often cross their arms or cross their legs. And that's a subconscious, like closing themselves off physically to close themselves off emotionally. And anyways, this body language of being literally on the other side of the room, like he's against the wall from where Troy is sitting. This is how much he does not want to talk about anything going on with him. And I have to say, nice touch, directors, like for this scene. That was really well done.
And Robert Weimer did a fantastic job.
Yeah, his body language of pacing. He wasn't looking at Troy. He wasn't facing Troy. He was agitated. He's like looking at his fingers. Like everything about his body was saying, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I didn't even think of that. But now that you said it, it's like, oh, you're totally right. And he does open up to her. He's like, the last time I saw her was about 7 months ago. And I feel so guilty. I didn't see her when I had the chance. That Troy is on fire. She's like, you feel a tremendous amount of guilt that you didn't see your mom when you had the chance. You're unwilling to consider that she's dead, and your need for her to be alive is so strong, it manifested itself into this image that you're seeing. And I was like, wow, Troy. I mean, this is kind of like what we as the audience sort of see this and know this because they made it clear for us. through the episode, but she is so spot on with her analysis. And I gotta say,
and she takes it further too. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say, TNG, Gene Roddenberry's dream was that in TNG, none of the characters have any conflict with each other. Like, they're very far from actually being human for the most part. Like, everybody's perfect. There's no flaws. Deep Space Nine was a big paradigm shift because this is the first time you see like truly flawed individuals working in a flawed system, and like some really questionable things are happening. And there's a reason why a lot of people are like, I can't stand DS9, and a reason why a lot of people love it, because it's just very, very different, right? And so in my mind, Counselor Troy is the closest thing to like a human character on the show. She is intimately in touch with like sadness and depression and stuff that like no other cast member even gets close to touching, because everything is great all the time with them, right? And she's like, no, we have this whole wheel of emotions that we're born with, and we should be able to access them all. And my appreciation for her like went through the roof in this episode. I mean, she was already kicking a lot of butt like season 5 and 6, but wow, I was like, go
and
girl.
This might even be the only time she is in this episode, and it's amazing. She's
good.
Yeah, she takes it further because Geordi says, like, why would I invent all of this? Why would I invent some crazy story where my mom's trapped on the surface? If this was a fantasy, wouldn't I picture her like alive and well and happy-go-lucky somewhere on her ship? And Troy says, actually, no. She says, the more involved and complicating and unending your story is, the longer you can believe that your mother's still alive.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just a perfect description of denial when it comes to this kind of loss. And it reminded me of a crime drama show that I love, where this guy's like mentor died, and they used to always play. He was actually brutally murdered because it's a crime drama, of course. But they like wrote this guy off the show, and then they brutally murdered him seasons later. But the guy who was his mentee, they used to always play chess together. And so after he found out that his mentor had died, he kept playing their last chess game. Like he took the chessboard with him everywhere, and he like kept playing both sides. But he's a genius, so he could play in such a way where it's always a stalemate. And they had been showing him playing this game for like several episodes. And one of the characters was just, which in TV time was like months and months and months.
Yeah.
The characters was just like, playing that game is not going to bring him back. And you have to kind of like let him go. And letting him go was him putting down the chessboard, like stop playing. And it's exactly like what Troy's saying here. It's like, no, if you have something that's unending, then you can at least hold on to something to say, this is still going. Some part of this is still going.
There's, you hear a lot of stories, usually like books and things like that, where like a beloved person dies and their loved ones like refuse to change their bedrooms around or anything. They've left it exactly how it was. Yeah, it becomes a shrine. Yeah. Now, this is
Geordi storms off because this is not acceptable for him to hear.
Yeah. And so, as he's trying to make this like crazy plot work in his mind of like this subspace funnel with some accidental distortion that the Hera passed by and now it's trapped. So he's over here trying to make it work. And Riker comes by to kind of talk to Geordi and open up about his own mother's death, which you talked about. And Riker's like, it took me years to finally accept that she was dead, and I kept thinking she was going to come back. And Geordi's like, are you fucking serious with this right now? Like, my mother is dying and needs me right now, and you're stopping me from helping her, and you have the nerve to come down here and give me the whole my mom's death was hard to speech. Like, get out of here. And like, he just can't sit there and do nothing. So of course, because Picard was like, you are ordered not to connect with the interface, he sneaks into the lab and goes to help her. Now, I gotta say, this is one of the most beautiful friendship moments I've ever seen. I was super emotional watching this. Data was waiting for him in the lab, and he's like, I know you so well. I knew you would come.
Well, Data walks in right before Geordi goes, like, plugs himself in, pushes the last button. He's wearing the mocap suit. He's like in the middle. He's like frantically going from panel to panel, and he's about to hit enter. And then the doors open and Data comes in, and you're just like, busted.
Yeah.
But yeah, Data is just like, he says it in a Data way, but basically, I know you so well. I knew this is exactly what you were going to do. I knew this is exactly where you come. Obviously. And Data's the only one there. No one else knew he would do this. Everyone else thought he would follow orders. Data's like, I knew you'd be right here, right now.
Yes.
Which is amazing. Yeah.
And Data does say, like, what you're doing is dangerous. You almost died. Beverly doesn't want you to do this anymore. You're in like heightened danger. I could have you confined to quarters. And Geordi just makes this like impassioned speech about like how he can't just sit there and do nothing. His mom needs him. He has to help her. And Data is just so much more than just an android here. Like, I love it so much. Like, he helps Geordi and he says, well, you actually have to, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, like, you kind of have to break the rules for me to confine you to quarters. Like, I can't confine you to quarters.
For me to say you broke the rules.
Yeah.
I can't punish you for not breaking the rules. Well,
yeah,
you know,
just
one
for
thing
wanting to,
one thing that's interesting is Geordi does say, like, I can't live with myself knowing that I could have done something and I didn't. And I just left my mom to die. And for me, that, I feel like he should have said that in the observation lounge, because for me, that does it. I'm like, go for it. Go.
Yeah.
Like, you need to, like, if I couldn't live with myself.
Also, it's your life and your body, and I don't want you to hurt yourself, but like, you also are in charge of your own body. And if you are willingly taking a risk that could end in a fatality of your own, that's your decision to do that.
Sort of, but not really. Not when you're in the military. You don't have as much agency over.
But they're explorers, aren't they? Yeah.
So, like, sort of, but not real. Like, he's not a civilian. He doesn't have the right to put his life in danger on a whim. However, if I were in his position, I would have done the same thing. Totally. If I was in Picard's position, I would have done the same thing. I would have told him, no, absolutely not. If I was Beverly, I would have said, no, absolutely not. If I was Geordi, I would have been like, absolutely, I'm doing this. I don't care. Right? So it's like everybody's making their decisions this episode, and I think everyone's decisions completely align with the character of who they are.
Yeah.
So Data
it totally does.
But he says, I do have one request. Please at least consider the possibility that what you see isn't real. And Geordi says, I will. I agree. So I thought that was reasonable.
Yeah. So interface is established. Geordi goes looking for his mom. She immediately appears. She tells him about the warp funnel. Yeah, she tells him about the warp funnel immediately, and I was like, this is suspicious.
In the most scammy way, right? It's like, we were trapped in a warp. It's like exactly what you just said, like and exactly the way you said it. With so no additional information. Okay, Come on.
Something is so weird here. Data locates where the signal is coming from while Geordi is talking his mom through the whole plan. Mom's not acting right. Geordi's like, I can't wait to tell Dad. And Mom goes, we are going home. And I was like, oh, fuck. Get out of there, Geordi.
I know. So creepy, right?
Yes. And thank God they didn't make like the lights flash and stuff, because I would have been like, nope, I'm out. So interference makes Geordi lose the connection. So he tells Geordi tells Data to turn up,
boost up the gain.
Yeah, to 100%, which could kill him. And Data is like, I don't like this, but he does. He goes to 100, and Geordi's talking to Mom, and he's like, I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you 3 weeks ago. It won't happen again. And the interference continues to mess with things, right? So because now he's bringing the Raman down to the surface, which is what Mom is saying. Like, you need to come down to the surface with the Raman. Even though gas giants don't have like a real surface, they just have more of like a densely compacted gas.
Yeah, I didn't understand that at all. I was like, they're in a gas giant. What is she talking about? How is the Hera on the surface? How are they bringing it down to the surface? I thought they just went into the gas giant to scoop out a little bit of the gas to study it. Like, that's
probably
what the was doing.
Probably what it is. Gas giant, yes, they are gas. Like, I've had my students ask me this, like, can you fly all the way through the center, kind of like you could?
Yeah, like smoke, like you could, or whatever.
Like smoke or like fog. You can, with the caveat, and I'm no expert on this, so if you know more about this, info at the TNGpodcast.com. Please, I love to nerd out about this stuff. The pressure, it's just more densely compacted gas. Okay. So you could still fly through it. However, the pressure keeping that gas in a sphere shape and dense like that is so intense, it would just crush the ship that you're in.
So you could potentially land on it.
There's still no definitive surface. You know, like if you drive into a fog bank, you could be like, oh, the fog starts kind of like right past that street.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. But
you can't.
An area of high pressure, though, is something you could physically touch from an area of low pressure. Like, that's what a tornado is.
Yes. Even though like you can go through it, but yes, you can you can basically approach the surface and like kind of get like closest to that.
That's interesting.
That's what I was picturing.
Okay, I think they shouldn't. I think they shouldn't say gas giant. I think they should pick other planetary bodies.
Something else, right? But now, so at this point, you know, the interference, because they're getting close to the surface with the Raman, the interference is getting higher and higher, and Data's like, we're already at 100%. Power with the interface suit. Like, I can't go any higher. And Geordi's like, yeah, you can. And Data's like, I won't do that. And he does tell Geordi, like, Geordi, you're putting me in a very difficult position. This is the closest that Data will get to being like, dude, this is messed up. Like, if something happens to you, I can't live with myself. But Geordi, again, is like, there are 300 people down there. Like, if I have to lose my life to save 300 people, one of whom is my mother, I will. And Data, being a friend, like, does it. And I was like, like, just ugly crying watching this whole thing. Right. And of course, by now, Picard and everybody else knows that the Ramon is like moving to the surface.
And in about 2 seconds, they're like, it's Geordi. They're
like, obviously.
Let's all go to the lab. It's Geordi. Who else could it be? There's no one else. There's no one else.
Yeah. And Picard is like, you're going to kill yourself. Damn it. Right. It's like that kind of like, don't go any further. Right. And Geordi's like, if I stop now, 300 people die. I can't stop. Right. So it gets really
And
intense.
Because the tolerance is boosted on the interface, like over 100%, the way it's configured, they can't just cut him off cold turkey like they did before. They have to lower it back down to a safe level and then unplug him. So Beverly's like, I can't just unplug him. We can't just we can't force him to stop. He has to choose to like stop doing what he's doing so we can bring it back down to safe levels. So now everybody's between a rock and a hard place.
Totally. Although, I love the analogy that they use, like a decompression chamber. Like if divers go too deep for too long and nitrogen bubbles form, you can get the bends, which is disorienting. And then people, when they're disoriented underwater, can sometimes swim deeper instead of closer to the surface, right? Because they don't know which way they're going. And then the problem compounds, and then most of the time they end up dying. And so, it's like, we got to decompress. So when they do pull divers out like that, you can't deal with the sudden depressurization. And so they put you in a pressurized chamber to mimic what the pressure was like where you were. And then they very, very slowly kind of bring you back up to the surface pressure. So they're like, we could decompression chamber him. It's like, love this. Absolutely love this. So Geordi at this point is like scanning for the ship because he's aboard the Ramon, on the probe, scanning for the ship and finds nothing. And Mom is like, well, there must be too much interference. And he's like, no, like at this point, like I should be picking up something, like anything. And I'm not seeing anything
There's
out
not
there.
Even any metal on this gas giant. So there's no way there's a ship with 300 people big enough to hold 300 people sitting here.
Like what? And
at that moment, weren't you just like, get away, Geordi, turn around, reverse
Geordi,
thrusters.
get away. Right, because he's all like beepity boop boop boop, like in problem solving mode, and Mom
and his
sneaks
back
up
is
behind
turned
him
to Mom too, which I don't like.
Don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. Mom sneaks up behind him and puts her hands near his temples and zaps his brain with her hands. And I just wrote, oh my God. And so Geordi goes into neural shock.
Okay, so here's what happens terrifying. In this scene. In this scene, when she zaps him, I paused it to write down like Geordi's mom zapped him in the head or something like that. Don't turn your back. I don't even know what I'm looking at my notes. I don't even know what I wrote. But what I do remember was when I paused it at that moment and I looked at the screen, every single fingertip of hers had a lightning, like yellow beam coming from it. It was
scary,
beautiful and gorgeous, like special effects.
Yes.
Somebody went through and made sure even her pinky, every single finger had a beam of light that came off of the finger. The fingers were brighter just on the tips, but regular colored below. It hit a different point on his head. I was like, this is like somebody had to zoom in and sit pixel by pixel and do this.
Yeah, beautiful.
And it's for like, I don't know, 3 seconds that it's on screen, but it's very beautifully done and it's very believable and it's super terrifying. And you're just like, Geordi, dude, like, why'd you turn your back? But of course, it's his mom. Why wouldn't he turn? Why would that be dangerous?
Why wouldn't he?
But we're seeing it and you're just like, run, get out of there behind you. She's behind you.
She's behind you. Don't run into the basement with all the knives in it. Like, it's just a very scary moment. And so he goes into neural shock. And from the lab, when he's in the VR suit, Geordi says, reverse tractor beam. And so they reverse the tractor beam, which like kind of breaks the connection with Mom. And I thought, holy crap, what a hell of an actor that LeVar Burton is. Because here is a man who is pretending to be in tremendous amounts of pain and neural shock and electricity and doubt and regret. Like he has really run the gamut of like all these horrible things that could be happening to him, like physically and emotionally. And every moment of it is so believable. Had this episode been written and shot in season 1, we would have been like, what the F? But like, I mean, I was feeling that way going into this episode, but I was like, wow, this is what the beauty of season 7 is, where the characters are fleshed out. LeVar Burton, somebody give that man an Emmy for that scene alone. So that manages to like break the zap.
And then instantly Mom disappears and then reappears as a plume of fire. I was like, okay, all right, we're getting out of here. Get me out of here. Like something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. So again, they made the really wise choice of turning this whole thing into a mystery, and we just get more and more confused about what's going on, as opposed to being terrified, which they could have easily done at this moment as well. So now she's fire, and then she goes back to being mom, and Geordi's just looking at her and says, "What are you?" And you're like, "Oh my gosh." So he knows the game's up, and he doesn't, he doesn't run, he doesn't fight. He's just like, he holds his ground. "What are you?" And mom says, "You're killing us. We must go down." That did not answer my question.
That didn't answer my question. I said, "What are you?" or "Who are you?" And you're telling me no. So Geordi manages to get through to Picard in the VR suit and tells him what he now knows. These are subspace creatures native to the gas giant's lower atmosphere that became trapped when the Raman entered. And then when the Raman left the atmosphere, those creatures started dying because they can't live in the upper atmosphere.
They didn't know how to get out of the ship, and they didn't know how to turn the ship back around because they're not ship-faring people.
No, they're just subspace little balls of light or whatever.
Balls.
Yeah, they're fireballs. And so they attempted to communicate with the crew members of the Raman, but they inadvertently killed them because it led to synaptic overload and they died. But they were able to successfully read LaForge's mind via his interface with the probe. And I just wrote...
Because they connected with the probe and not directly with his brain.
Yes. But here in my notes, I wrote, now, how is this any more believable than Geordi's previous theory of like a warp funnel? They both are like, really?
What's more believable is that these creatures live here and caused all this damage. That's more believable than mom was 300 light years away and suddenly found herself here and is communicating to you from the surface, through your visor, through the interface, into this other ship and all this other stuff.
Yeah, so it's too much stuff.
Equally possible that could have been a storyline, but I think it's that, like, we've seen subspace aliens. You remember the subspace string, the galactic string, right?
Yes.
We've seen subspace aliens before that are unusual. So I think that's the part that makes it like, okay, that's believable that she was like flame and communicates with people's brains. Okay. Yeah. But the fact that she took the shape of his mom was what threw everything off and made it weird. And the fact that she could read his mind and say, he came through the funnel or whatever. The fact that she was acting very strange, like all of that to like gain his confidence so that he would do what she wanted and take them down when she could have just showed up as a fire beam being in the first place. That's what makes it kind of like, what? Why'd you do all that?
Remember that episode with the Traveler where once thoughts started shaping their reality, the first thing that Picard saw was his mother sitting down to have tea.
That's
like
true.
The mother imagery is very, very strong in all of us. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and say it often doesn't even matter what our relationships are with our mothers in reality. The idea of the mother is so powerful in every single culture that is really strong imagery. And it was a good call on the subspace creatures' behalf because it did immediately get Geordi to trust her and be like, sure, whatever you need. If it was just anybody else, he'd be like, I don't know what this is. Now,
but like, I think you're right. And I think we discovered that this being was reading his mind. So obviously the biggest thing on his mind was mom at the time when he went, because the first few times he went in, there was no mom, right? Because he was just there was a lot of fire though. So the fire beings might've been in all that fire, but there was no mom. You know what? And actually now I'm thinking about it, maybe that's exactly what they were trying to do when he saw the 7 people and the flame came out of nowhere and he started screaming. Maybe that was the fire being, trying to communicate through their natural form or whatever. But when he went in that other time, his mom was on his mind, and that's when mom showed up. And
you're right, because he didn't know when the fire first burned him. Like, I don't think he did. He didn't know.
He didn't know.
No, he did, because remember his hands were burned, and Beverly was like, "You're gonna need some time to heal," and he's like, "Well, there's something I need to do anyway." So that's when he goes and calls dad and says, "Hey." But yeah, at the beginning, you're right. Like at the beginning, he didn't know anything about his mom. His mom was not on his mind, and so we never saw anything like that. But now at this point, he's like, "Okay, you're not my mom. However, you are energy beings that are trapped, and I'm going to do whatever I can to release you." And so he manages to get the Raman close enough to that low enough into the atmosphere that they can release themselves from the ship. And mom says, "We're safe now," and disappears into a blazing fire. And I just thought, remember with John Q, he like turned into a ball of light and flew away. I was like, what? You couldn't do something like that? Like a swirling fire tornado? Really? Like that CGI didn't look that great. I was like, we could have done without the fire. Have her turn into like a ball of light like John Q and float away or whatever. That would
just dissolve.
Or dissolve. Yeah, just
because this is just a mental picture. Like this whole mom figure is just in his mind.
Yeah. But he does help them get released, but in the meantime, almost dies himself.
And by the way, we don't know what happens with this ship, right? They don't ever get it back up to the surface, or we just don't find out whatever happens to the ship.
No.
Okay.
He does go into like super overload. But Data and Beverly managed to do the decompression kick to get him back like right in the nick of time. So while I will say this very short scene, while Geordi now knows that this is not his mom, that it is an energy being, and he is just doing like a rescue mission to help them get back to like the lower atmosphere, he does say to this person he now knows is not his mom, I'm really sorry I didn't respond to your message. Like, I wish I would have. And I think he used the opportunity knowing it was not her, but it looked like her, so that he could substitute it for mom and make his peace.
Absolutely. Because when she leaves as a fireball, he says goodbye. Right? Like goodbye to mom. So he was able to process and to let go through this fire being. So this fire being ended up being really helpful. Even though he almost died, it actually ended up being really helpful for his process, more so than anything anyone else could have possibly done.
Yeah, totally. Now, I guess all is well that ends well, because it's been a couple of days. Picard calls Geordi to his quarters and absolutely tears him a new one about how he put his life in danger, yada, yada, yada. And he will have to write this in his permanent record. And he says, dismissed. And as Geordi turns to leave, he says, Geordi, I'm very sorry that you didn't find your mother. And Geordi says, when I was down there, it was so real. I felt like I had my chance to say goodbye. And that was really beautiful to me, because look at what the scene is. It's Geordi being reprimanded by his superior officer sternly, and still able to have this tender moment with Picard. This, to me, is what 7 years of work looks like. Had this episode been written in season 2, it wouldn't have hit this hard. And that Data Geordi friendship moments where it's like, Geordi, you're putting me in a very difficult situation. I don't want to see you get hurt. It had tenderness, and it was exquisite. It was exquisite. I really, really loved it.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it does really show how much these characters have grown and how much these characters have grown together. The fact that Picard can reprimand him strongly and sternly, which he had every right to do. That was appropriate. But still be sensitive and empathetic to what Geordi's going through. And that Geordi's taking it well, of like, yeah, I screwed up. He even tries to take responsibility for Data's hand in it. And Picard's having none of that. He's like, I will speak to Data on his own. Like, Data's still going to get in trouble for what Data did, because Data is also an adult. But I love that Geordi can stand there and take all of his punishment, which is appropriate, and still be able to be vulnerable with Picard as well, because there's a trust there. This is the opposite of Captain Jellicoe. This is somebody who has your back, and that's why he's so pissed you didn't listen to him, because he has your back. Like, he was trying to keep you alive and keep the whole crew safe, and that's his job. And he also understands that you would do anything for your mom, and he would too if he was in your position. So there's just this give and take of like professionalism and trust. That's really beautiful in this scene. I think you're right.
You're so right. And if this had been a Captain Jellicoe thing, he would have ripped Geordi a new one and dismissed him, and maybe would have been like, I'm sorry about your mom. And Geordi would have been like, thanks, and walked out. They don't have that trust. And you always have that trust with Picard. So what are your final thoughts on this episode? Are they different than your initial thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I still don't love this episode. I still think it's much better than last week's episode, because it's like coherent and focused. One thing that surprised me about this is the thing that's different. I just remember really not liking this episode. Here's the thing that's different. The technology in this episode was so cool. Like, I love the idea of it. I feel like it was really well thought out. It fit in the world building perfectly to me. I just thought it was really neat and very functional. I think that the storyline was so clean. Like, I don't feel like there was any scenes that didn't directly lead to or add to the story that was being told. So I felt like it was a really well told story. And I think we've seen grief and loss a lot on the show, because it's a big part of the human experience. And I enjoyed this telling of it. Like, it didn't make me sad at the end. So
yeah,
I won't say I loved it. Like, I'll probably still never watch this episode again, but it was not horrible. Like, I had an impression of it.
Yeah. I mean,
what about you?
I could see why you probably won't watch it again, because there are so many just spectacularly flawless episodes that if one is like, well, it wasn't that great, but it was better than I thought, you have like a bounty of other episodes to choose from. You would never have to watch this again. My final thoughts were, wow, I absolutely was wrong in my initial thoughts. And it's not a case of mistaken identity. Like, I knew what this episode was. I just didn't love it the first time I saw it. I didn't like it at all. So I always skipped it. But I think the fire aspect is what makes it a little bit ridiculous to me. And like a little bit of like the mind reading portion where it's like the energy beings like read his mind and then took the shape of the mom. But really, as far as I can tell, like this episode is actually really, really beautifully done. And I had a few sort of thoughts on this. I mentioned this before, but this is, as far as I can tell, the first time we saw this type of sci-fi storyline. Like, if you die in the simulation, you die in the real world kind of thing. Like, that was really, really interesting. I thought it was a groundbreaking topic no one had even thought of yet. I could be wrong though. Like, there could be some earlier sci-fi stuff that did this, but they do it in such a clever way with the whole like interface suit, neural shock burns kind of thing to show how dangerous the system really is. I was like, these were excellent plot points. One, two, again, a giant round of applause to LeVar Burton's physical acting. He was in neural shock a handful of times. He had his brain zapped, and he had to play all of those sensations while standing in a circuit suit is like ridiculous, you know? And then we also had him like being angry and defiant and grieving and all that. It was just a great time for him to flex his acting chops. And then finally, I thought that the moments between Data and Geordi were absolutely heartbreaking and stand out in my mind as possibly the best performance these two share on screen together. Where, you know, we talked with Pip about how Data always says he doesn't have emotions, but he does, you know, and all that stuff. And Data weighing, you know, in his little android brain, he's like weighing the like risks of allowing Geordi to jump back in the interface suit, to wrench it up to 100, to wrench it past 100. And every time he chose, instead of being an android, he chose to be a friend. And
that's true.
He did it. And I was like, God, it hits me in the feels really hard. So I probably will watch this episode again. I really, really liked it. I was delighted to be wrong about my initial
that's got to be a great feeling. Like, I hope we're both wrong about so many more episodes in season 7, because I'm not looking forward to most of them. So I hope that we're like pleasantly surprised like this.
We're not going to be wrong about next week.
Darn it.
It's bad. Yeah. Guys, yeah, it is a good feeling. And I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts, because girl, we're going to buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Next week, guys, we are breaking down season 7, episode 4, Gambit Part 1. Thank you so much for nerding out with us. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.